Good afternoon. Welcome to House Appropriations. It is February 19th at 1:30, and we are going to continue taking testimony on the fiscal year 26 budget, and we have the pleasure of hearing from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. That's your whole title?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Welcome this afternoon. Madam Secretary, have you been before us this session yet?
I believe I did for the BAA,
Okay.
but it might be helpful. I don't know if everybody was present, but I'm happy to take a second to do introductions again. We have Dan Dickerson here, so might as well do it.
And I suspect Dan knows a few.
Yeah, I know Dan probably knows everybody.
Why don't we quickly go around the room for you and your team that might be present with you today.
Okay,
Great. I'm happy to start. I'm Dave Iacoboni from Morrisville, and I represent the Lamoille, Washington District. Welcome.
Welcome. John Kosenska from Burke, and I represent the Essex Caledonia District.
Mike Nigro, I represent Bennington and Powell.
And this is Representative Stevens, unfortunately, today from Waterbury and Huntington. I am Jim Harrison from Killington, Chittenden, Mendon, and Pittsfield. Welcome. And your turn.
And our erstwhile chair, Robin Scheib from
And
Middlebury.
she'll be with us. Sure.
Yeah. And I'm Tiff Bloomley from Burlington.
Trevor Squirrel, Underhill and Jericho.
Wayne Rush, Highgate, Franklin, Berkshire, Richford.
Hi, Mike Murwicki, Wyndham Ford District, Putney and Dorset.
Lynn Dickinson, I represent St. Romans Town.
great. Shall I begin? Okay. So for the record, I'm Lindsay Curley. I'm the Secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. I'm here with the ACCD leadership team, who you'll hear from, to present our FY 2026 budget. ACCD consists of 3 departments, all actively engaged in generating revenue for the state's general fund. We have the Department of Tourism and Marketing, which is led by Commissioner Pelham. You might want to just raise your hand. We'll be seeing her in a minute. And she leads a team of 14. This department is responsible for preserving the Vermont brand and marketing the state as a premier destination to visit, work, and live. We have the Department of Economic Development, led by Commissioner Goldstein. She leads a team of 28 who are focused on business recruitment, retention, and expansion. And their work includes site location assistance, policy advocacy, and connecting businesses with resources for permitting, incentives, and funding, and much more. The Department of Housing and Community Development is led by Commissioner Farrell, who is here in the room as well. And he has 43 full-time employees and seasonal staff. They coordinate and implement the state's housing policies, support housing providers, and promote the production and preservation of affordable housing. The department also oversees the Division for Historic Preservation, which has oversight and safeguards Vermont's historic sites and structures. The Division of Administration, this team of 17 provides legal, financial, policy, communications, and administrative supports across all departments. Deputy Secretary Tate Brooks manages the day-to-day operations in addition to his broader role as the Deputy Secretary. And joining me today, my left, is Dan Dickerson, our Administrative Services Director, who led the development of our budget proposal and ensures financial oversight for our agency. So altogether, our agency has a dedicated team of 102 employees, but our work extends far beyond our agency, and we don't take it on alone. We rely on strong partnerships statewide, our boots on the ground, which include the RDCs, or the Regional Development Corporations, the Regional Planning Commissions, which we call the RPCs, downtown organizations, municipalities, housing nonprofits, chambers of commerce, educational institutions, and other state agencies. And with that, I want to just give you I'm going to give you the very high wave tops of the budget, and then I'm going to let Dan dive into he's going to do the deeper dive. So starting with our total budget, our proposed total budget is 105 million, which is composed of the following. We have $63.4 million in base funding. And the way that is made up is 32% of that, or 20 million, is from federal funds. 43%, or $27 million, is from the general fund. 21% comes from special funds, and 8% comes from interdepartmental transfers. We are proposing 6.8 million in new base initiatives. And what makes up the 6.8 million includes 4.3 million for the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, which you're going to hear more from Commissioner Farrell about. It's been a very successful program that we've had to bring housing online at a low subsidy from the state. 2.15 million for the Manufactured Home Improvement and Repair Program, which efficiently also helps with keeping people housed and by fixing, might be leaky roofs or repairing things that are broken on their at their home. And so that again helps us from people who may be at risk of losing their home. 350,000 to make our international business development program permanent, ensuring Vermont remains competitive in attracting global investments. And you're going to hear more from Commissioner Goldstein about that. That covers the base initiatives. And then this budget also includes 41.65 million in one-time funding requests. We are looking for 15 million to support the Rental Revolving Loan Fund Program, which is run by VHFA. 15 million for what's called the Middle Income Home Ownership Program, which is also run by VHFA. These are programs that they've been running that have shown to be very successful, and we want to continue to support those programs rather than creating something new. We know these work. They've been very, as I mentioned, effective in bringing housing units online. 9.1 million for an infrastructure sustainability fund. Again, we've heard about gaps of trying to get infrastructure online so that we can get housing built. So this is 9.1 million that would help municipalities get that infrastructure in place to bring on much needed housing. 2 million for the Brownfields Revitalization Fund. Again, you're probably going to hear more from Commissioner Goldstein on the Brownfields programs if you want to learn more. 300,000 to support 2 existing limited service housing positions. Commissioner Farrell will talk about that. We have a lot of work happening in the housing arena, and so that money will help support that work. And then 250,000 for the Vermont Professionals of Color Network to continue technical assistance, workforce development, and business support for BIPOC entrepreneurs. At this time, I would defer to you. If I think that we could start with the administrative division's budget we could go through the ups and downs and let Dan go through that. And then you can choose which commissioner you want to go to next, what department you want to follow Dan's presentation with. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay. Take it away, Dan.
Great. Well, thanks for having us. Once again, I'm Dan Dickerson with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. I'm going to touch on the administrative division. I'll just note that the division's made up of 17 staff members. 15 of those are permanent employees and 2 are limited service. And as far as the ups and downs, you've probably seen a lot of this sort of format. So if you have questions on the layout, I'm happy to answer them, but I'll assume that you've seen this a few times, so I won't go too much into detail. Really, there's not a whole lot changing substantively within the admin division. Everything that we're doing is within the growth threshold, the general fund growth thresholds that were outlined by the Department of Finance and Management, so the 3% that we were allotted. We are hoping to initiate a couple of new contracts, or actually, build in base funding for one contract that's ongoing. That's with Dun & Bradstreet. They've been doing some housing analysis work and some other work for us. So we're hoping to build that in as an ongoing funding mechanism. And then we're hoping to partner with the Department of Labor to do some economic analysis work. They have their labor market analysis division, and we've had a good partnership with them. And so we set aside some money to pass along to them when they help us out. The only two other notable things on the operating expense side, we do still have an active EB-5 center, and that's because some cases are still being litigated. And so while we have that active center, we have to continue paying a $20,000 annual fee, and we're building that into the admin budget in FY26. Hopefully in the next year or two, things will get resolved with finality and we can drop that amount. But for now, it's in there, and we'll hopefully get it out soon. And then finally, the admin division does issue about $390,000 in annual grants. Much of that goes to the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund. In the current fiscal year, we have a $250,000 grant award with them, and we're hoping to raise that to $275,000 in FY26. And that was a request of DSJF that we went along with. So that is, yes, sir.
On the EB-5 fee, is that going into a escrow account or something? Or how is that working?
It's going directly to the Department of Treasury. So it's something we have to pay to them to keep the center active.
If there's money in there, if everything gets closed out, do you get anything back?
No, it's not an escrow. It's just a fee that we have to pay. Okay. We had planned to go next to the Department of Tourism Marketing, but as Secretary Curley indicated, if you have a preference, we can pivot and.
I think that's great. I mean, it's the next page.
All right.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Well, with that, good afternoon, everybody. For the record, my name is Heather Pelham. I am the Commissioner of the Department of Tourism and Marketing. Really appreciate the time to be with you today. As was mentioned, Department of Tourism is a 714. Two of those for us are also limited service. And that is because we did receive a large amount of federal funding coming out of COVID to support travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation. I mentioned that right off the bat because it's really gives context for the work that we've been doing in the last couple of years in the fact that we have received this, it was a $10.4 million award. That's several times what our normal budget is. So it's really been driving all of our activities. And we did get 2 limited service positions to help us with that work. If you go on to the next page, you'll see some of our very high level metrics in terms of what tourism creates for Vermont's economy. We welcome 15.8 million visitors in 2023 who spent $4 billion in direct spending at restaurants, lodging, recreation, cultural attractions, you name it. Yes.
How much of that was spent during the eclipse?
We did no, it's all right. We actually did do a separate economic impact analysis for the eclipse. I believe it came in right around 50 million. But I can certainly forward that report to the committee. It was a great event. Happy to do that every year. The direct spending that visitors bring to the state adds up to $282 million in direct taxes that they paid. So if we think about what that means on a statewide level, that's the equivalent of $1,000 per Vermont household. So when we think about the impact of tourism on the economy, it is definitely significant, and it employs about 10% of our workforce. Over 30,000 Vermonters work in the visitor economy at large. So how do we support the industry? And I will say, maybe I'll say right here, one of the reasons maybe why I'm going first, our budget is a little bit easier this year. We do not have a specific ask in terms of funding, and that is because we are spending down these federal dollars. At the same time, we know these federal dollars are not going to last forever. This particular tranche is on a reimbursement basis. We certainly hope that we will continue to be able to draw down those funds through the end of September when the grant period ends. We all know there's some uncertainty there, but we have a lot of great work in process that we hope to be able to continue. That said, what do we do on a normal day-to-day basis? So our work is really in 4 different categories: destination marketing, destination development, relocation work, and the chief marketing office. So first off the bat, destination marketing. As the secretary said, it is our job to promote the state, to make sure that everybody keeps Vermont top of mind as a place to come and to visit. We know that tourism supports, as I said, 10% of our workforce, but it's really distributed all over the state. It's one of the things that's wonderful. Take the eclipse as an example. You didn't have to be in any one place. There's so many wonderful places in the state that you can come as a visitor and enjoy all that we have to offer. So it's very diversified in terms of the amount of communities that tourism supports. We do that through own media. So what we say about ourselves, earned media, working with the journalists and media, and then paid media. So that's basically, marketing and advertising. We were, with this additional federal funding we received, we were able to do quite a bit this last summer, fall season. We were able to create 3 new videos that we put out to the market. We received almost 16 million video completions to date. Those are 3-minute long videos. So if you think about how long we talk about spending time with the brand. So if you're watching a video that's 3 minutes, that's an awful lot of time you're spending thinking about Vermont, helping us tell that story, much more than just maybe a social post or a digital display ad that you might click on. We do that as well, but it's very exciting that with this funding, we've been able to do some of these more in-depth tactics. We were able to get over 200 million impressions with that work. What that adds up to, we see one of the advertising effectiveness studies that we did is that people who are exposed to our advertising are 3 times more likely to show up in market and make purchases when they're here. So that's in the realm of destination marketing. In your budget book, we have a very significant narrative that talks about all of our different programs if you're interested in some of the specifics about our marketing activities. The next area of our work is destination development. So that's really how can we support the tourism infrastructure in the state, all of our businesses. This is where it's really, tourism is in that intersection with our sister departments in the agency. So tourism is a force of economic development. It's also about community development as well. It's how can we, help Vermonters have a good quality of life from the economic activity that visitation brings to the state. With this federal funding, we were able to do a lot of different projects we've never had the ability to do before. Top of that list is a destination management strategic plan that we are involved in right now. We spent all of last week traveling around the state doing a series of listening sessions, a lot of great ideas about how we can support the industry going forward. We are also doing a year-long visitation study, of intercept survey for our visitors. We're doing a brand perception study, so we really understand how folks think about the Vermont brand and how we can support that going forward. We were also able to we're investing in different types of market research. We're about to embark on a BIPOC visitation study, specifically to make sure that we can continue to attract a diverse group of visitors to our state. We were also able to create a grant program called T-Term, which stands for Transformational Tourism Events and Regional Marketing, really to sort of spread the love to all of our local communities where we could support projects that would, in the long run, bring more visitors to the state. We also were involved in a couple outdoor recreation and hospitality management workforce training programs, and are also working on an economic impact toolkit that local communities can use to assess what investments in outdoor recreation will mean to their local economy. So this is just a bit of a laundry list of projects that we're involved in, supported by this federal money that we would love to be able to continue in the future. The third bucket is our relocation work. So this is through Think Vermont. So again, not only we're promoting the state for visitation, but also to encourage folks who might want to relocate here. We do that through the Think Vermont program. And thanks to base funding we received from this body, two sessions ago, we were able to create the GROW grant program, Grants for Relocation and Outreach Work. We just finished our first full year of that. What that does is give grants to local organizations. They may be an RDC, maybe a downtown organization, depending on the region. And that enables them to bring on staff so they can actually manage those leads that come in through Think Vermont. So when someone raises their hand and say, I'd love to move to Vermont, how do I do that? How can I get involved in the local community? Can you help me find housing, childcare, and so forth? That folks on the ground are able to provide that one-on-one level concierge type service. The grantees that we are funding with that work are thinking about that relocation piece of it, but they're also thinking about retention. So we have 2 tracks. One is relocation, one is outreach. The retention piece is really helping folks feel welcome in their new communities. So the funding we provide helps local organizations put on events and other types of activities where they can basically have established residents meet new residents and so forth. Again, think about how we can integrate folks into their new communities so that they stay. First year of the program, we saw 52 families move specifically from this program. That is far and away not the total amount. That just happens to be the people who we were able to track through this program specifically. So just about 100 Vermonters. One of the nice things about this grant funding is we now do receive reporting on a monthly basis so that we can now see that pipeline as folks who are interested, they make contact and then eventually end up moving here. And I can provide more detail on that. Some of that is in the budget narrative if you are interested. And then the final piece is the Chief Marketing Office. There are two staff members in our department who serve the rest of the state government enterprise with marketing and communications assistance. I'll say that again, that's two for the entire state enterprise, but they do what they can in terms of helping other state agencies with their outreach and public engagement and marketing projects, whether that be contracting and procurement of services, helping folks with branding, creating templates that other agencies can use. There's been a lot of work in this space recently around accessible design. So how does the state meet its obligations under ADA for all state websites, for instance, to be accessible by 2026? So the Chief Marketing Office has been involved in a lot of that. They've stood up a couple of different communities of practice to support web editors and other communications folks in roles in other state agencies do that work altogether. So you can see right there, they've touched 465 state employees in the past year. So that is the broad overview of the Department of Tourism and Marketing. Can certainly go through the ups and downs, or if there's any questions about what we do, how we do it, I'm more than happy to
Our chair would
say more. Yes, of course.
And I apologize for being late. I was in another meeting and anyway,
But all right.
glad to at least hear part of what you were chatting about. And I know I've looked just like the beginning of yours, you talked about $4 billion to the gross state product, the state, whatever we call it. Yeah, GDP, GSP, right? Yeah. Which is great. Congratulations. And I'm wondering, did I hear somewhere that that was like the second highest percentage of a state's GSP with Hawaii being number one or something? Did I read that or?
There's a couple different statistics that get a little confused. So there is the number 2 in the nation behind Hawaii is the percentage of GDP that comes from outdoor recreation.
Outdoor recreation.
That is clearly a nexus to tourism at large.
Okay.
So second in the nation in economic impact from outdoor recreation. When we did our economic impact study for the visitor economy as a whole, we calculated that tourism is 9.3% of the state GDP. That is significantly higher than, I don't have it for every state, but the average across the nation is more about 3% comes from tourism. So we are several times more dependent, quote unquote, on tourism in Vermont than other states. You're welcome.
Okay, so there we go, ups and downs.
Yes.
I can touch on this quickly. So I'll just highlight two general things, one being in the general fund column. Aside from pressures that impact every state agency, the real movement here is we've shifted some expenditures to increase what is available for GROW grants. So in FY25, we have 700,000 available in our general fund budget for those grants. In FY26, we're hoping to increase that amount to $1,050,000 because it's a successful program and we want to increase those opportunities for folks. So that's the big movement in the general fund column. In the federal column, you're seeing a big decrease. That's mainly because that one grant, the EDA grant, is being spent down largely in FY25. And so there'll be some residual in FY26 that will be going out the door very early in the fiscal year. I believe the program ends, or the grant ends at the end of October, I believe. Yeah. So that the rest of that will go out the door pretty quickly in the beginning of FY26. But other than that, no real big changes, but happy to answer any questions before we move on to the next.
I have one question on the GROW grants, and that's sort of where I came in. Excuse me. they haven't been around that long, I guess, but how are you tracking? Do you plan to track how long are people living here? You know, are they still here in 5 years? Are they, moving away? Are you tracking that kind of information? Or are you just tracking when they show up?
We are definitely tracking. So right now, what we are tracking is both when they finally move here, but also how many touch points it takes for them to get here. And then we're tracking, how many folks come to outreach events and so forth. I'd have to look and see if we've asked that question yet about, the problem is when people leave, they don't necessarily tell us they're leaving. Right. So it's
Check in with them.
right. Well, yeah. So I would say that anecdotally, we are not hearing a lot of that. Certainly that's why we have retention as a, core part of that program to make for sure that people do stay. I can certainly, we've just been doing 1 year of reporting. I can certainly make sure we add that if we're just make sure we're at least asking the questions, have you heard of folks who came here and who are leaving? But right now it's definitely moving in the direction we want, in the sense that it may take people a while, but they are definitely taking advantage of the program. So we had 1 year under our belt. We have another, we're in the second year just going into it. And then we don't have a full coverage over the entire state. There's just a couple of gaps that we would love to be able to fill with the additional funding going to.
Because I think that is important because, I can remember when I moved here and I've heard since, like, if you make it through the first 2 years, then you're likely to stay. But you have to get a couple of winters under your belt, so it isn't just all sunshine and roses. And so, you may not need to track them for 5 years, 10 years, but, a couple of years to see are people actually staying. I think it would be really helpful to know that.
Yeah.
I see Rep. LaRouche and then Dickinson.
Do you have collecting any data on occupations of people coming?
We do have data on that. We track sort of community engagement. So how many referrals are we giving to local employers? How many referrals are we giving to local schools? Just trying to get an idea of the types of questions that people are asking for. And then it kind of depends on the region as to where they're focused. Some regions are really focusing on making sure that all of their employers really understand about this particular program so they can use that in their recruitment efforts. Others are more focused on the retention aspect to make sure that they're doing enough mixers and just really making sure people are talking to each other and feel supported in their communities. So there is some flexibility in the program for communities to really define what success looks like for them. But we do ask as many questions as we can to make sure that we understand, where people are coming from, where are they relocating to. I can tell you that from what we've seen so far, there's not any one place that people are relocating to. That's fairly distributed across the region. In our numbers, we see the most in Rutland County. That's mostly because they've been doing this the longest and their program is the most mature. So they are really quite good at the support network that they have created. But where folks are coming from, it's really national. I think it's from 23 different states people are moving from.
Yeah, when you say your touch points, how many touch points is it, you've been studying that it takes to get them to actually move here?
Well, we've seen the number of touch points definitely varies. So sometimes people may not contact a Grow grantee until they already have a job offer and maybe they are just looking for a business group or housing or childcare, something like that. The average time it takes to move, we've seen is about 3 to 4 months. So again, some people just let us know when they're really on the cusp of moving here. Other times we are having conversations with people for over 3 years. It's not a light decision in terms of how you move here. How many touch points it takes for any one individual, we can do that math. Haven't done that math. We've really looked at what we've looked at the most is what is that time horizon in terms of, for our efforts we're doing now, when do we expect to see a payoff on that? And that seems to be like around 4 months.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next year, I'll come back with more asks.
Gosh. Have a good week for school vacation week. In the ski areas right now.
Yes, but great snow year.
Good afternoon. I'm starting, okay. Joan Goldstein, Commissioner, Department of Economic Development.
See you again. The department is a staff of 28, and that is including all of our limited service positions that were funded via ARP. Thank you, you're controlling. Just a few highlights. I'm not going to go through every single program that we do, but just some idea of what we've been up to. So throughout the ARPA funding cycle over the last several years, we granted 155 grants out to communities, industries, nonprofit organizations to do capital investment projects all throughout the state. And that enabled us to spend down and obligate the entire appropriation for DED by the deadline of 12/31/24. Do I have that right?
Farms included in this as well? Is this, or that's a different program?
That was different. Yeah, farms are included in the BGAP program.
Okay.
But not on the capital investment side. And then the Brownfield Revitalization Fund, which is one of the funds we're asking for a $2 million ask this year on one-time funding. So far, all the state appropriations we've done since fiscal year 21, we've granted out $21.9 million worth of grant funds to for-profits, nonprofits, municipalities to revitalize and redevelop brownfields. And that's leveraged $380 million worth of private development dollars. So a very successful program. And there's a long kind of pipeline of additional contaminated properties that could be redeveloped. And we want to do that. The other highlights here, just the number of workers that are trained in the Vermont training program. And that is a program that pays up to 50% of the cost of training for new workers or incumbent workers. And we also have Vermont Employment Growth Incentive, which has, since its inception, helped bring about $1.1 billion in qualifying capital investments. So that's a program that incentivizes both capital investment as well as job creation. So it just gives a flavor of what we do in case you're after. We have many other grant programs, but I'll try to focus just on what we're asking for this fiscal year, this upcoming fiscal year. The base funding increase of $350,000 is so that we could expand our international trade and international business development. Currently, we have a federally funded SBA STEP program, which is meant to expand trade. And it's meant for small businesses as they try to expand their business overseas or even Canada, Mexico. We could pay for trade shows, we could pay for translations. It's really very helpful to expand their revenue sources. We also utilize this for opportunities to understand the trade shows that other foreign companies are attending, and those foreign companies that need a U.S. foothold, right? Either through Buy America provisions, or they are expanding and they want, government contracts. So far, what we've done is work almost exclusively with Canada, and we know there are opportunities elsewhere. And so we want to be able to expand our idea, right, to Europe and Asia, because there are opportunities afoot, and it's like drinking from a fire hose. We can't possibly do all of that. We need to hire consultants that could help us target the appropriate businesses that are interested in expansion and are interested in US. And so we would include the Canada effort as well as any of the other expansion efforts into this $350,000 base request.
Yeah, I'm just curious about kind of, can you get a little more specific about kind of what type of trade you're thinking about?
So it's, sorry, thank you for the question, because I kind of went too fast. There's one part of it that's trade, right? So that's trade coming from Vermont out to the other regions, and that we predominantly just use the federal funds. This money is really for our foreign direct investment, and that's really our recruitment effort. Our business recruitment is not to go after the large Amazons of this world or any of these larger entities, but small businesses, like they could be a small family business in Austria, as an example, and they want a U.S. foothold. There's no reason why Vermont can't compete. It's just, how do we identify those opportunities, and how do we have the funding to be able to explore that better? We've limited it just to Canada.
And so this is really for getting that foreign direct investment, which could either be a purchase, it could be an expansion of an existing business overseas that establishes a foothold here. It takes a variety of options.
And you would do that by hiring consultants to?
Yeah, primarily because we need people like boots on the ground. Like right now in Canada, we have a Montreal representative. So they are able to solicit, interest. And then from like hundreds of companies, whittle it down to maybe 10 that might be interested to 4 that we're actually showing properties to. So it's a big funnel and we need to really show that we're open for that type of investment and business. And there's some great opportunities. People do want to start up their operation or expand their operation into the US.
And so, how are the tariff threats playing into Canada in particular, or Mexico, or like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. I'm not gonna, we can't sugarcoat it. It's definitely something that's on their minds. There's lots of concern. We'll see what happens on, I forget what the deadline is, March 2nd, but really there's a lot of impact for US, all of us, right, who may end up paying more for things and.
But are people from Canada going to want to come? Good, please.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, there's been an impact, I think, on tourism so far, but.
Speak what, a question I may be reading your mind on this, but a little bit, it's like, there are Canadian companies that are asking questions about how they might move to the US to avoid the tariffs.
Oh, okay.
So for that reason, it's not just, Joan was saying more broadly, she wants to reach beyond Canada. But as an example, other countries are impacted as well. So right now we have a pulse on Canadian companies that are making these inquiries.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have those contacts as broadly elsewhere. So that's where this could help us. But we do know that there's interest right now. And because we're a small state and we're nimble and we're accessible, we can have, people can reach us and we can have those conversations. But there is an interest. We created a program that was lifted in the beginning of February 24, the Rural Industrial Development Program, which we can talk a little bit about, but where we laid some groundwork to create a program to actually provide space and buildings for these companies to move to. And so there could be some energy afoot of companies that want to move here. And so we want
Or at least have a location.
At least have a location.
We want to
How the tariffs are gonna work.
We want to be ready for those conversations. We're sensitive to how hard these conversations are difficult and it's outside our comfort zone. But the reality is this money would help us have some of those conversations more broadly than the ones we're having just the north of the border.
Right.
So sorry to jump in, but I was trying to read
okay.
her mind a little bit.
That's
but
all right.
she may have been.
So Wayne had his hand up and then Lynn.
So, are you looking at the kinds of, I don't know how much is left, 350,000, not a lot of money to do a lot of thinking, but just thinking in terms of what kinds of businesses that you might want to try to focus on to attract that would be compatible, most compatible or most profitable for the state of Vermont or well.
Gladly. Yeah, I think so far it's been manufacturing, some technology and some green energy. So I think it's like that combination. It usually has to do with that. Manufacturing, primarily, they need a made in America, especially if they want DoD contracts, that type of a thing. And that's what's happened from Canada. But we've had food manufacturing companies interested in establishing in Vermont. So it's sort of varied, but again, smaller entities, not these large, multinationals.
The big incentive is made in America.
Yes.
Yeah, this reminds me of when the bar wanted to go independent of Canada and we had all kinds of farmers leaving Quebec. All kinds of places, but a bunch of them couldn't be similar dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, who knows where it will all end up, because right now we're in a little bit of flux, but I think irrespective of that, like we generated this before, like we came up with this idea in the fall. So, irrespective of what's happening, in order to expand the number of businesses in Vermont, we could grow that organically. We could recruit, and this is very much, our recruitment effort is really geared towards international, rather than going to other states and trying to take their business. That's just not, we don't have that large ass, we don't have that kind of mentality.
Work.
Yeah.
So you have what, 150 now?
So we got, in total, from the two one-time money, I think in total was 400, right? 250, 150, something like that. And that, so
Over 2 years.
over two, more than 2 years. I think it was probably 3 years now that we had one-time money that kind of carried over. But it took about 2 years to spend that level
So
down.
it's been one-time money and it's, I think last year was maybe
150,
right?
correct.
Now you're asking for, instead of 150 one time, you're asking 350 base.
Yes,
Is that correct?
exactly. This way we could come up with a plan, a true strategy about international expansion and about recruitment in more than just Canada.
Thank you.
State brownfields revitalization funds, yeah, just to put a little bit more detail on that. So far, 42 projects, 706 housing units, 831 jobs, and leveraged over $380 million of redevelopment funding that, the private developers or the nonprofit developers or the municipalities are bringing to these projects. Our new request is one-time expenditure of $2 million. One of the other asks on one-time expenditure is Vermont Professionals of Color Network. That is technical assistance for businesses and for them to continue their good work. 2 years ago, we had a one-time expenditure for the same amount, and that is just running out right now. So we're asking for $250. And then the VITA Business Disaster Relief Fund, I don't know where that hits in the budget because it's really just really like a reversion of the 7 million that was appropriated in the e-board meeting for BGAP.
Right.
And we have
Have
that,
to reappropriate it or reallocate it or
Right.
add additional use.
something.
Yeah, do it. They were looking at possibly doing it in the budget
Just,
adjustment, but it was too fast and Congress hadn't taken testimony and,
that's fine.
So I know they're talking about it as well.
Right, so it would be just 2 million that comes at residual over to VITA to do a disaster relief funds. They could do a loan fund that could really be, at the ready. We think we'll have more disasters. We don't like that idea, but, rather than setting up a whole new grant program each and every time, have a loan fund that gets established by VITA and they could be there the day after, just to.
So the e-board authorized 7 million last July.
Yeah.
And, so this would keep 5 in BGAP and 2 million moving over to VITA. And so of the 5 million, what has you,
I think it's about 4 million and change. I don't have the exact number. We think there will still be a little bit more residual. But we're just winding down to the last bits of the appropriation.
and that's where the farms were included. I'm
Yes.
saying that because some people
Yes.
didn't realize that farms were.
Yes, farms were included and farms would be included in this VITA loan fund. Program spotlight. So I think we've covered all of the kind of money asks and then just additional program spotlights about supporting business expansion. Veggie has attracted 1.4 million in net new tax revenue in 24. And that is just as we net it of any of the Veggie incentives that get paid, of the accumulated outstanding Veggie authorized accounts. TIF, about TIF. There's no appropriation ask there. Right, and then the economic assistance and recovery, that was the 50 million in ARPA. Projects were funded all over the 14 counties.
Has all that money been spent down?
And that has all been obligated. I think spent has about 40%.
Yeah.
Yeah, so far.
And you'll meet the 26.
Meet the deadline. We've got a team that's monitoring. Those are the folks that are funded by the limited service positions, thankfully, keeping track, reporting out on where they are on these projects. And the government contracting support, it's now called Vermont Apex Accelerator. That's 3/4 funded by the feds. And there have been 282 million in federal and state contracts. 241 businesses were able to tap into that. With 4,000 contracts secured. So they do a great job. They're all around the state. They're situated where the Small Business Development Center is. Well, up to ups and downs. Okay.
You got
Anyway.
Are Are you, because I'm looking, this page has the Northern Border Regional Commission before the ups and downs, sorry. Erin.
Yeah, Northern Border Regional Commission is a great program. In fact, it's been increasing every year. And we just got word that it's increasing this year so far.
That's federal fund, right?
That's federal funds.
Have you had any of your grant money or federal funds frozen for any of the
No.
programs?
Nothing, not yet.
Yeah, across the agency, right now, the spigots are still flowing
Yeah.
across all of our departments.
And you know that's
So
not
far, so good.
so.
No, I know, we're very, I mean, the one concern would be EPA, because we do have some federal funding from EPA for brownfields, so that would just be one concern, since it feels like, I don't know, you know,
Yeah,
who knows
well,
what's gonna
There's
happen.
words that trigger things that they don't like, so
Yeah.
I get that. Well, Wayne, did you have a question?
The northern border, money, how much money roughly is there?
I think this year, last year it was like 12 million, I think, in total. And it's brilliant money because it could be a grant to a municipality or a non-for-profit organization, and infrastructure is the target. So it's, in many cases, it has coupled up with some of our ARPA money, it's coupled up with some of the A&R revolving loan funds for wastewater, so it's really critical. I mean, it's so far, it's a wonderful program.
Wastewater, drinking water,
Wastewater, drinking water, any infrastructure, street, you know, yeah, infrastructure in a very broad sense of the term. We put money in Killington project. There's also funding going to the childcare project in Randolph. It's really all over. Our website will have the listings of every recipient.
And just to give you a number, for just NBRC capacity grants, we get about 391,000 a year to push out the door. And then we get outdoor recreation focused funding from NBRC that's about 160,000. So in total, it's roughly 550.
So in addition to the grant monies, which don't hit our budget, it's really that we prioritize the projects. But NBRC has their own administration. It's just that we get the benefit of prioritizing which projects should get funded, and they do all the admin. The money doesn't hit us, but we do get capacity money to fund a position, as well as some assistance to the RDCs as well.
so the outdoor recreation money?
And outdoor recreation money is currently going to the outdoor recreation, I'll call it a department, but it's really a sub of the Forest Parks and Recreation
So
Department.
it's going into A&R.
Yeah,
Or
Vorak, yes.
Vorak.
Thank you.
I knew there was a C in there.
Another, yeah.
Wrong direction. Yes. Okay.
Okay, so I will jump into the ups and downs. On the general fund side, no real significant changes aside from general pressures, other than you'll see in personal services of the new 350,000 base we're asking for. 305,000 of that ends up there, and then 45,000 is in operating. On the special fund side, I just want to highlight one number down in the grants category. This rural industrial development, 2.5 million. 2 years ago, we received a $5 million appropriation through the newly created capital investment cash funds. And there was a provision where the program was authorized that said DED could receive funds back in the event that, you know, certain things happen. I think it's a sale of a property that received one of these funds or one of these grants. So what we're proposing to do is build some spending authority into our base budget, where if those funds flow back in, we can then sort of revolve them to an additional award. And so that's why you see the 2.5. We don't anticipate that if funds came back in, they'd probably be much less than that, but we sort of built that in as a, you know, if we do get a lot of money back, then we at least have the spending authority to send it back out the door. So that's why you see that relatively large number there. On the federal fund side, we are receiving a supplement to our federal brownfield award. So we'll spend that probably in FY 26, and then you'll see that drop back out. It's sort of like a one-time supplement. And then just.
Just one question. That's not a match to the 2 million, right?
No.
It's just its own separate grant.
It's a separate grant that we applied for, yep.
And then finally, in the interdepartmental transfer side, we had some legacy spending authority that we were carrying. I labeled this as EB5 funds. I probably could have been more descriptive, but there was a Newport development program that DED managed a few years ago. Those funds have been spent, or at least obligated. I think there might be a tiny amount left that we still have to spend. And so we're dropping that $1 million of spending authority from budget because the funds are gone.
Special funds. And then the cannabis business development funds, did that have a lifespan and that's done, or what was that?
So there was provision in law that authorized, I believe, the Cannabis Control Board to collect a $50,000 fee from a specific entity. And then that money was to go into this business development fund that would be administered by DED. So we did the Cannabis Control Board did collect 2 of those fees that then got passed along to us. So we budgeted for spending those funds in FY 25. We haven't, no more fees have materialized. And so we're just dropping that in 26. And then I think a couple of donations came in that made up that little bit of additional.
Not seeing any questions.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
You and I were RDC directors.
That's right.
Yes, before we went here, we both ended up in Montpelier. In different roles. So we go way back. When did you start at Green Mountain?
09.
Yeah, and I started in 08. So we've known each other.
We were like the only two.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was 16 years ago. Whew, we aren't counting. The alternative is worse.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's great. And Alex sent some updated documents. Maybe that's what these are. I also got an email and they're posted on our website, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is the VHIP, which you received those stats in your email. Your email will also have MER, which we'll talk about in a moment here. For the record, Alex Farrell, Commissioner at the Department of Housing and Community Development. Madam Chair, would you like me to jump right in?
Please.
All right, thank you. So why don't we take a look quickly at the structure of the department. I'm sure a lot of you are broadly familiar with what we do, but we have 4 divisions within the department. Housing division, which is relatively small, division for community planning or revitalization, which focuses largely on working with our municipalities. Division for historic preservation, which Secretary Curley touched on before. I'm going to take a moment to brag about our state-owned historic sites because this year we had record attendance and record revenue at our sites. So it's a really good year for historic sites.
Including the underwater, you have underwater historic sites.
We do. We have underwater preserves. That's right. Yeah.
The only state that has something like that underwater.
Well, none of our historic sites, so to speak, our state-owned museums are underwater, but yeah, we do manage with the Maritime Museum the underwater preserve. Got a good link.
Got all kinds of things in it. Some we're happy to know about.
That's right. And then to round out our department, the Vermont Community Development Program, which administers funds from, these are federal funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Again, so far, these have been safe. Under the last Trump administration, they were all safe, but this is a flag. So this is community development block grant funding. It's also recovery housing funding. And we also have administered some coronavirus relief funds through this program.
We heard, who told me this? Did you tell me this? Somebody told me that HUD has laid off a bunch of staff. Have you heard that?
I hadn't heard about that. It doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. We have a really good relationship with our Boston regional office. In fact, we've been so far out in front of some of the regulations such as Build America, Buy America, that they've taken our training materials and used those as their training materials to share out. a good relationship there. This is also the division that will be the vehicle through which the disaster recovery funding will come through. So the 68 million, which is coming through Vermont, the CDBG DR is a shorthand that you may hear. It's disaster recovery funding that will flow through this team, but this team's going to be closely coordinating with the recovery office as it puts together its. That's right, yeah. And we have until the end of April to put together what they call the action plan to administer those funds.
So you don't have the money at this point.
It always makes us nervous.
We understand.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So the programs I'm going to talk about are really just those where we're seeking funding. I'm not going to dive into everything we do. I just want to prioritize these programs. So I just passed around some stats on VHIP, the Vermont Housing Improvement Program. Very well-known program, but I just like to point out, we just cleared the 1,000 unit threshold. We funded over 1,000 units of VHIP, which is really just extraordinary. If, you all, I'm sure, receive presentations from a lot of our partners who we coordinate our CDBG funding with. So our traditional mechanisms of funding housing, you would never see numbers like this through, say, our CDBG program. So we've been really proud of what we could do with VHIP.
Yeah, I have a question.
Thank you, and thank you for the program. I know several people who have been able to access funds and help create some accessory dwelling units. I've also heard from people that are having trouble accessing some funds. I'm just wondering how the flow is going.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. That's a great question. There's tremendously high demand for this program. And so some homeownership centers who administer this for us have stopped accepting applications because we just have not been able to keep up with demand. One of the reasons we're seeking base funding, while I wouldn't be surprised if we could spend 20 million a year in VHIP, but we've been operating off of one-time funds. And so some folks who have sought grants through VHIP, through our homeownership centers, have felt this unpredictability of these one-time tranches that come through where there's, it opens wide up for as long as the funding lasts, and then they have to close because they build up such a backlog. And so we've obligated essentially everything we have on hand, and we're just trying to give some predictability now.
And this is what we call the VHIP 2 program that we're talking about.
That's right. We use the term VHIP 2.0 just to recognize that we've moved to state general funds now, so we can administer the full program in statute. When we were administering it with ARPA funding, we could only administer essentially a portion of what we were authorized to in statute.
More limits.
Exactly. That's right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So are these are straight out grants? They're not like, you don't have to pay that back like a loan?
That's a great question. These are structured in, we have two different mechanisms for this funding: grants and forgivable loans. Folks who choose the 5-year option to administer it as a grant, we're exploring doing forgivable loans for all of this funding. So as it stands right now, if you accept the 10-year covenant, which has some looser restrictions but a longer compliance period, it's given to you as a forgivable loan. The benefit of a forgivable loan really is the tax implications, because it's on your books as a loan, and then each year, if 10% of it on the 10-year is forgiven, that is your tax burden for the year, that portion that's forgiven, rather than when you receive a grant, that full grant is taxable income. And so we're trying to mitigate that for some folks. Thank you.
And that's a factor that really does help.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because the tax implications can be challenging.
And you have, you get a certain amount if you have it affordable for 5 years, and a larger amount if it's affordable for 10 years. Is that still the way it works?
It's the same amount, but the way we have tiered the incentive is if you, so there's a couple different ways the award is different. So let me start with the length of the compliance period. So if you opt for a 5-year covenant, Because it's a shorter compliance period, you have the stricter requirements. You required to rehouse somebody exiting homelessness. We've had tremendous success there where private landlords who had never entered this space before are developing really good bonds with coordinated entry leads in these areas and developing good relationships with these households that they've now housed and had in their units. So that's been really successful. The longer compliance period, the 10-year, it's longer, but instead you're just renting at HUD fair market rent. So there's not a restriction as to who you're renting to. Now, the amounts differ in that if you are building a studio up to 2-bed, you can get up to $30,000. If you are creating a new unit or rehabbing a unit that's more than 2-bed, you can get up to $50,000. You can now, as of last year, get up to $70,000. I'm sorry, this sounds so convoluted when I say it out loud. You can now get up to $70,000 for certain accessibility upgrades that you're making to apartments.
So you have 4.3 in base. It's been one time until now, but isn't there also 15 million? Is that one time that we're seeing the governor's budget? Am I mistaken?
No, that is
What was that?
VHFA funding.
VHFA, that was all VHFA.
Two,
Two $15 million things.
that's right.
Our cursive acronyms, all of these, it's hard to keep track.
Yeah, okay.
Chad's ears perked up.
Chad, do you mind diverting some of that to VHAP?
I couldn't, all the Vs,
We'll sort that out later, Chad.
I was trying to remember which was which, okay.
That's okay.
But this was been one time until this particular request is moving to base.
That's right.
And how much did we do last, remember?
6 million in one
Right,
sentence.
because you also have a lot of carry forward,
We did, which was a little misleading.
because you used it all, I think.
Oh, it's all gone, yeah.
This is fine, I mean, that's the whole point.
Yeah, that is the idea. Yeah, no, it's been successful. That's a good thing. So we don't mind. Okay, so the next program, MER, I'm sorry that I didn't give you a handout, but Aaron passed along my email to you. So this is the Manufactured Home Improvement and Repair Program. The highlights of this are this can serve, this is focused on mobile home parks. So mobile homes in mobile home parks. This could be home repairs. So if somebody's unit needs some upgrades to keep them housed. So these are a lot of really precariously housed households. So could be repairing a roof that's leaking, door that might be falling off, windows that are leaking. So that's the home repair. And that's really thinking about the upstream side of homelessness, keeping people from falling into homelessness. We also, with this program, focus on the health of the park. So this could improve the infrastructure of the park, could be water and wastewater systems, could be conduits to the units. And this also helps these parks to expand, which is a key to some of their sustainability. Adding new lots and putting in the pads that need to go in there so that these parks can actually expand. And there is increased interest in living in mobile home parks, manufactured home communities, because it is more naturally occurring affordable housing.
And so that's also been one time. And what was it for this current year?
2 1 million amounts.
Yeah.
I think one came from the budget and one might have been an act, either a contingent in the budget or Act 181. I
It
can't.
was 181.
181.
Yeah.
And then the e-board, was this where we also did the 7 million from the e-board? We did 7 million for BGAP in July, and then there's 7 million for, what was it, rapid response?
That's right. So similar. Also had to do with mobile homes in mobile
Yes.
parks, but a different program, a different effort.
Okay. Did that money all get spent?
You would have to check with VTrans and VSHA.
Okay, so, okay,
So I can give you a quick summary.
okay.
The portion of the money that went to VTrans, because VTrans was going to do the labor of improving lots where those homes were going to be placed.
Right.
Vermont State Housing Authority received 4 million, I believe, 4 million of the 7
Okay.
to do the bulk purchasing. They have fully spent down or at least obligated VSHA's full portion to buy the units.
Okay.
And so as a result, we're looking at ways to either double down on that and wait for that money to revolve so that depending on the timing, VSHA could maybe borrow from VTrans's fund and then reimburse as they get money back from home buyers. But that is getting spent down very quickly. They're approaching 100 improved lots. I think they may have already hit that threshold on the V-Trans side, and they have placed 30 homes, several of which are already under contract. And actually, I believe one or two just closed, one on Valentine's Day. So, but I'm not as directly involved. in the
Okay,
program.
that's fine. I hear manufactured homes and I think about a lot of what you do. Nick,
Well,
Ricky, you have a question.
Sure. I'm looking at the supports mobile home park improvements. Yeah, is that for units just in parks? I can share my own story where I first moved to Vermont in 1980. We lived in a trailer on a farm, and it was the only unit there. And I know there are other situations like that where there are just single units around, but this is specifically just for being in a park.
it is. And so you're right. There are a tremendous amount of manufactured homes that are placed on owned land in Vermont. This program is designed to support our mobile home parks. There are a couple of reasons for that. We'd love to serve all manufactured homes throughout the state. There's already such a high demand in our parks where they've really, frankly, been neglected by all of us for decades. And so we're trying to catch those parks up. The other reason is this is a broad statement I'm going to make, but generally speaking, if folks are on owned land rather than leased land in a park, you have equity, at least in your land, that you could, if you had to, you could use to borrow to make improvements to your home. We do have other funding sources that can support those types of repairs. So the CDBG program that I was talking about before, we actually provide funding to the home ownership centers who then can provide loans directly to low-income homeowners who need to make improvements to their home, especially if it's to keep them housed. So, it's really just serving different folks based on the situation. And in manufactured home parks, it's a little bit more precarious because you don't own your land, but you do own the unit on top of it.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so we'll keep moving. I suppose I should have clarified on both of those programs. So on VHIP, you see it's 4.3 in a request, 4 million for grants, and then 300,000 to support 2 permanent positions to run the program. We've been running that with limited service employees, and they've done an incredible job. But if you think about $40 million administered by just 2 people, and there's a lot of compliance that goes with that. We need to make sure that those folks stay permanent because there's.
You currently have the people. We want to go from limited service to permanent.
Keep them permanent.
Classified or whatever. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, all right.
I just wanted to add that, we met yesterday to talk about this, and one of the things that I asked was, okay, so there's a sunset to the covenant that the developers, the owners of these properties are kind of held to the income thresholds for housing home folks who are leaving homelessness. I'm having trouble describing what you're doing. So my question, I am assuming that those 2 staff members can try to work closely with the folks who, for whom these units could just go right to market value without some consulting and encouragement.
That's right. That's right. So I am trying to make eye contact. The glare behind you, Representative. You have a nice.
It's sun.
Yeah. No, it's great. I feel a tan. You have a halo around you. It's wonderful. But you're right. You're right to jump to this chart on the back of your sheets here, which shows when some of these compliance periods will be ending. And you're right. So part of the goal here, and you can see that 66 of the first units. Keep in mind that was before it was VHIP. It was Coronavirus Relief Fund. So those 66 units whose compliance period will end this year were prior to the homelessness requirements. So it's 26 where we'll see the first homelessness units coming potentially out of their covenant, and then we'll see what happens. But thank you, Representative Bloomley. It's a great point. So data collection is a key part of the compliance that we're going to be undertaking with these 2 staff members. So we're going to have annual recertifications for these VHIP landlords, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their experience, just we're confirming that they're still serving who we think they're serving, et cetera. But then the other piece is starting to get a sense of what their intentions are at the end of the covenant. That gives us an opportunity to interact with them, engage them, and understand what tools we can provide to maybe keep some of those households where they are and not disrupt those homes. So that's absolutely part of what these two folks are intended to do. The 2.15 for MER, same thing, $200,000 for grants, $150,000 to make a staff member permanent to run that program. Okay. So moving on to some of the one-time requests that are in the governor's proposal. So in our Path to Vermont bill, we have proposed the Vermont Infrastructure Sustainability Fund. This would be a joint effort. It would be administered by the Vermont Bond Bank. We developed this program in coordination with the Agency of Natural Resources. The goal of this, you see $9.1 million and you think, how far could that really go in infrastructure? The goal of this is twofold. So it's a revolving loan fund. So the idea is we establish the fund and we can continue to contribute to it in out years. But in the meantime, this 9.1 is intended to leverage existing sources. So A&R's existing state revolving funds, other federal sources. You could even think of NBRC, perhaps. The difference here with this 9.1 million, this fund that we're proposing, is it needs to directly tie to housing production. So whether it's infrastructure to go into a parcel for a specific housing project, or if, for example, a community needs to extend a water or wastewater line to expand their service area because they intend to build more housing. We also want to include transportation infrastructure. So I think of just down the road here in Barrie, there's a project, Prospect Heights, and one of the big hurdles to getting that off the ground is running an access road into the parcel. That was very costly. So this is going to be low interest loans that municipalities can access. The next, we're split between two pages, but I'll start with the first VHFA program, the Middle Income Homeownership Development Program. This is a $15 million request to re-up this program that's been very successful. I just confirmed with Chad a minute ago. I thought I recalled correctly. It's not in the title, but we were able to work with the legislature last year to adapt this so that these funds, at least a portion of these funds, can revolve. So this will continue to come back to the fund in the future.
When you say a portion revolves, because some of this is grants.
Well, I'm going to get out of my depth here, and Maura would kick me if I say the wrong thing. So the way I understand it, Madam Chair, is it would depend on the economics of the project.
Okay.
How much could be grant versus come back to the fund.
But whatever can come back and become more of a revolving fund.
Exactly. The rental revolving fund is sort of its counterpart in the rental space. What I want to say about this program, much like the other, but in this case, this has achieved incredible efficiency in terms of the cost per unit and what it was able to achieve in terms of the number of units with the one-time funds that it has been granted. Again, revolving loan fund, so these will come back into the program. It's serving a broad spectrum of incomes, which is a bit of a gap in a lot of our traditional sources. But what I want to say, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, I was really impressed when VHFA shared the stats and who they ended up serving. And I think probably what was anticipated is that this would hover pretty healthily above median income. And that really wasn't the case. I mean, there was a good amount of units that were clearly serving folks under median income. And so I think that's having, in my opinion, the desired effect of the portion of the population who's feeling the most pressure here is benefiting from these units. So this has been a really effective program. The next item is smaller, but it is very important to our work. So we have several limited service positions that we've been using to push a lot of our initiatives forward. Some of those initiatives don't have money directly attached to them that we can draw off of. So In this case, we're seeking $300,000 to extend two of our limited service positions. And some of the key initiatives that these two positions work on and will continue to work on include Homes for All. Hopefully folks have heard of our Homes for All initiative, but if you haven't, a quick synopsis is the goal is to expand the number of Vermonters that can participate in small scale development. We released a toolkit, which is basically almost like a textbook that will teach someone who might want to build an ADU or some small infill development from A to Z. Where do you go to get a permit? What does a pro forma look like? How do you develop all that? What are some possible designs? And it teaches you how to do this infill development. Future phases of this include actually training a cohort of small scale developers and giving these folks the tools to do it themselves. And then a third and phase, hopefully not too far in the future, would be developing designs that municipalities could adopt as pre-approved designs. So if you choose from a suite of designs, you would just get your permit and you could put those units online, say 1 to 4 units. So leaning into our infill. These positions would also support the tremendous amount of housing data work that we've been doing lately, creating new dashboards, setting targets, and then annually reporting progress towards those targets at a statewide and regional level.
So these are different two positions than the two positions for VHIP.
That's right.
Okay.
These are just limited service.
Right, well, there's two limited service positions in VHIP.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna make it permanent. And so do you have these positions these positions exist now?
We do. You can think of, we have 6 limited service positions across the board that are doing all this work.
And they were gonna end.
That's exactly right.
Extend it for
This would give us a year
a year.
runway, to continue this work.
Just a general thought, it's bothered me a little bit. All the housing that we're building, are we building the right housing in the right places to attract the people that we need to serve the industries and communities that we have? Or are we building something that's going to be liability in the long run?
I think it's a great question. And one of the reasons you hear our team talk about the whole housing spectrum is for exactly that reason. We have pressure points at the entire housing spectrum. So you'll hear us talk about the need to sufficiently fund VHCB, contribute to VHFA's middle income programs, support shelters, and focus on the regulatory environment. The reason for that is we need to make sure that we are building housing at all levels. And so we survey the market and try to understand where there are pressure points or math problems where it's not penciling out. That's where we try to direct programmatic dollars to close those gaps.
My question was, you are thinking about these things.
Yes, very much so. Thank you. That's a great question.
Lynn, did you?
I want to follow up on that. So where are we missing? Yeah. You're following up on it. I mean, if we're trying to attract these people who are coming here from somewhere else, and they may want to have a single family home with a garage and it's really a place to play and on a cul-de-sac, let's say. Where are we missing what they want? Or are we doing everything for every, is there places where we can get everything? Because it seems to me there's places that we do miss.
Yeah.
In my view.
Yeah, and I'll answer that twofold because I think there's a geographic component to your question, and I think there's an income level component to your question, right? And so when I think about who's hurting the most, it's folks at the lowest end of the economic spectrum. Who's trying to come to Vermont to take some jobs that we know we have a shortage of? That's going to be folks that are going to be served by these two VHFA programs. So in that sort of middle income range between 60% AMI and 150% AMI, 50% above the median. And really the goal with looking at both rentals and home ownership is to try to make sure we're covering that whole spectrum. There's another benefit to that, and that's that we can make better use of our existing stock. And so if we contribute to expanding the stock at that level, that middle income level, we're giving people the opportunity to get out of rental housing that right now is so constrained by competition that that's actually what's really contributing to squeezing folks at the lowest end of the economic spectrum and folks experiencing homelessness. And so we're trying to alleviate pressure at all points. We can't do it just at one point. We can't just build shelters. We can't just build new units to rehouse the homeless. And we can't just focus on high income or middle income. We need to contribute to all
We need to
ends.
get the people out of the rental units into a single family home or a duplex where they can then build some wealth and develop and free up the rental property.
That's right.
Yeah, I remember back in Commerce years ago, there was a discussion about trying to attract workforce.
Yeah.
Trying to attract people to Vermont, trying to pay for businesses and find people who could come here and live. And it was the mid-managed, you can get people right out of college, you can get the starter job, you can get the starter home or the starter apartment, live in the city or something. But it was the mid-level that could take your company to the next level, that had expertise, that came here from somewhere else probably.
Yeah.
And they were having a hard time finding the home, and they didn't want to live in an apartment over Main Street. They wanted to live in something more that they were used to in another area.
Yeah.
And that was both the housing and the difficulty in getting them to come here made it really hard because they couldn't find a place that they wanted to live in.
Mhm.
Is that what we're still getting gaps or?
I'd say that's still a huge gap for us. One of the reasons for our push on the regulatory side is exactly to enable more of that housing along with the middle income homeownership development fund. So that's a huge gap. Healthcare is also a huge gap. So our hospitals are really letting us know that they're hurting
For
and
their staff, for their workforce.
exactly.
Yeah.
And they're recognizing that we have an aging population. So what we're feeling right now is only going to increase over the next few years. And a lot of those folks may want to be in rental housing, whether it's nurse staff, administrative staff, they may want to live in a downtown near these folks. So you're right. We need to serve both of those needs. And I think both of these programs, as well as our regulatory package, are specifically intended to go after exactly what you're describing.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So
Oh, Dave, I'm so sorry. I have you written down.
That's
and I didn't
that's okay.
look at
I just had a couple of questions. When I go to the VHAP program, if I'm a landlord, get in the 5-year program, get a grant for some amount, and then at the end of the 5 years, could I sell?
You can actually sell at any point. So the way the program operates is it's a covenant on the property. So the property needs to
Stays with the property.
stays with the property. That's right.
Okay. Would I have to pay anything back though? Would you expect to recapture anything? I've improved the value of my property. I'm able to sell it at a profit and I take that and leave. I don't owe you anything?
No, the compliance is
Covenant.
not flexible. The covenant will
Have
require.
you noticed, or have we not been doing this long enough, if people are doing that? Are they liquidating the investment?
No, so folks have to go through us in order to get authorization to sell their property while this covenant. And we have
5 years.
Well, we've had very,
But you
very.
can do it at any time, your point.
That's right.
Thank you. I'm worried that in trying to serve everyone, though I appreciate the need to do that we don't serve anyone well. Not a criticism, but that we're just too diluted. I wonder if have we considered saying, well, we're going to take, you mentioned a figure 40 million, but I maybe shouldn't invoke that, but I don't know how big our total portfolio is. In any event, it's not small, I take it. May not be adequate to do the whole job, but it's real numbers. What if we said, we're going to make a Vermont Section 8 program? And we're going to say to landlords, come get your facility-based voucher, get your rents almost guaranteed. And on your nickel and your dime, you do what you need to do to your properties. And I'm focusing on those who you said were the most needy. It's on the lower end. I'm trying to help those, thinking that others will have the ways and means to address their own needs on their own end. Would there be enough money so that would be a therapeutic dose, so that we move the needle on helping those of low income secure housing?
So thank you, Representative. There's a lot of important points in there. And the first, I'll touch on, so that 40 million number I shared there. So this top line, the 38.9 million is just the total that's been granted to these projects.
Over the years,
That's right.
not annually.
That's right, since 2020, all these
Thank you.
one-time tranches. Now, I should also clarify that populations that are served by VHIP, thus far, it has been almost primarily folks exiting homelessness that have been served by VHIP. VHIP 2.0 did enable now, you've got two options. You can either serve folks exiting homelessness, or you have to serve rent at HUD for market rent. So it is really very restrictive, focused on the lowest end of the economic spectrum. Now, what you're describing, rental subsidies, vouchers, that is a part of the equation. That's a key part of the equation. The problem is we can't divert resources from expanding the housing stock instead to subsidize rent, only because then we're not expanding the universe. We're not expanding the stock. It's really where we lean on the federal government, but that's also something we need to monitor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative. Okay, so why don't I quickly touch on the downtown and village center tax credits. So this is consistent with requests from last year. If folks recall, so these are tax credits that are focused in our designated downtowns and village centers. Villages disproportionately benefit from this because these smaller investments can go very far in village centers. This is one of the most successful programs the state has in terms of leveraging other dollars. You can see last year our 4-ish million leveraged 160 million in private capital. These could be converting spaces in these downtowns and village centers into housing. It could be flood resiliency improvements. It could be facade improvements to make Main Street look a little better. So these are really effective investments that go a long way. During the pandemic, we were able to use federal dollars to temporarily increase the annual cap from 3 million to 5 million. We're asking to make that permanent. Our annual applications do come in just over 5 million. So this would go a long way to meeting almost the whole request. And this is foregone revenue. So this is not granted to us.
Right, so we'd be losing $2 million more in tax revenue.
Exactly.
That's what this is, yeah.
That's exactly right.
Well, I imagine you're talking to Ways and Means about this as well.
Yes. I think we've already been in.
Okay. You very well maybe.
This next slide, I don't need to spend much time on, but I just like to use this to highlight some of the information that we've been putting out, the studies that we've been undertaking. We've really had a tremendous amount of work over the summer and fall, studying different aspects of land use, housing, the data. And so it's really informed our work and been really important. Dan, I'll let you take it with the ups and downs.
Okay, so with DHCD, this is broken up into 2 pages. I'll focus on page 1 first, which covers personal services. On the general fund side, as far as salary and benefit pressures, there's sort of a twofold, or 2 factors at play here that are driving those costs. One is obviously, people get salary increases from COLA and they get step increases. The other thing is the federal sources that support so many, at least in some way, so many of the positions at DHCD have been relatively flat over the past few years. And so we're having to allocate more of those salary benefit costs to general fund. The way we're able to do that and still stay within the roughly 3% growth construct that the Department of Finance Management placed on us is we've reduced budgeted IT contract costs on the general fund side. Those were funds that we built in a few years ago when we, along with, I think, much of the state was going to go to a Salesforce grant management system. That sort of didn't go anywhere. And so we're now within ACCD utilizing an existing vendor to build a much cheaper, much less expensive grants management system, which results in us not needing a lot of the funding that we had in our base, which is good. But we are using that to address salary benefit pressures. On the federal fund side, those are big decreases. That is predominantly from a program that we've been leaning on for covering limited service position costs, which is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. That program ends on September 30th of this year. And so that sort of drives the conversation of, okay, here with VHIP and MER, we're hoping to get permanent positions. With a couple of other housing adjacent positions, we're hoping to get one-time funding. We have a few other little sources that can support some of the other existing limited service positions, but the federal funding we can't rely on starting at the end of September. So that's coming out of the budget. Also on the federal side, there are 2 one-time grants from the National Park Service that the Historic Preservation Division is leaning on to do work at the Justin Morrill site on drainage and at the Old Constitution House site on mold remediation. Some of that will be through personal service contracts. A great deal of that falls under the operating category, so you'll see that on the next page. I think that's it for personal services. Unless there are questions, I'll jump to the next page. Okay. On operating, just to skip over to federal really fast, you see the big pieces of money tied to those 2 grants that I just noted. On the general fund side, universal pressure, I'm sure, is just service level agreement increases. On the sites, those costs tend to rise year to year for lawn care, for other maintenance, for utilities. So we built those increases on the general fund side. The historic site special fund that does also support sites, because we've had more visitation and more revenues. That fund does help a little bit to alleviate those cost increases, but once again, it just doesn't grow fast enough to cover the increases. So a lot of it has to fall to the general fund. I think that's it for operating. On the grant side, you see the 6 million general fund. That's the new base funding we're asking for in the budget to support VHIP and MER. On the special fund side, this is where increased revenues from property transfer taxes get allocated every which way. We get a little bit of that to support contracts with the regional planning commissions and grants to municipalities. So that's the 1.6 million special fund.
And that's coming on top of whatever was in the property transfer in the D100 section.
Yeah, this basically gets added to whatever was allocated in D100 last year.
Okay.
So it's a net increase.
Okay. So this is for the RPCs and then the municipal and regional planning grants.
Yes.
But not the Center for Geographic Information.
That falls under ADS and that would be in their budget.
Okay, because the 3 show up together in the language section. Okay.
On the federal fund side, where it says VCDP, the Community Development, Vermont Community Development Program. So we had once again, a little bit of legacy spending authority in the budget. The big piece is there was 3 million in our 25 budget for CDBG CV. This was the COVID era supplemental award. Those funds have been spent. And so we're backing that spending authority out. A few little areas of federal dollars have increased a little. A few little areas have decreased a little. So that's all sort of baked into that line. And I can get back to you with more detail if you have those questions. But the big piece driving that was the CDBG CV. And then a few other little federal sources. ERAP is obviously done after September 30th. We had a little bit of grant funding built into the budget. And then the homeowner assistance fund, that's been completely expended and that fund's over. That was 50 million that came to the state that we, I think, granted to another organization to manage on our behalf, but VHFA, thank you. And yeah, a few little changes, but I'll leave it at that because I know we're short on time.
Excellent. Any other questions that anybody has? You guys are all doing a lot of work. And we appreciate all you're doing. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Agency of Development for coming and spending and telling us what you're up to. It's always nice to hear. Committee, we do have something else on the agenda. You probably haven't looked at it yet, but it's to have it Chris, Ruth and Logan are going to come in and talk about they talk transportation, the 20 million and why it's not happening this year and why they really mean it this year. So we're going to take 5 minutes and we're going to come back and